Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks so much for joining me this morning. Today, it's April Fool's, and I think you get to a certain age where April Fool's is no longer super funny. All right, so today we are talking about production and file setup. And the reason that this is important, the reason that understanding production as a packaging designer is important is because you don't want to do this amazing packaging design work and then hand this off to somebody else to manage and take your file apart and put it back together again. Maybe not put it back together in the same way that you would have, or make decisions for you without your input. And as an example, if you put together a file that you want certain colors to trend more blue, but you didn't set up the file properly and leaving it to the discretion of the pressman or the print team, they may feel, oh, you know what, I think they want this to be a little bit warmer, and they'll make things trend a different color. There's a million things that you can do to avoid this, and we're going to kind of go through a bunch of those. This is a quick class, so it's not going to be super in-depth, but it's going to give you some pretty good basics. So the first thing that I did is, let me tell you what we're going to do. I've got a file. I've created a file. It's for a drawer box, and it's got all sorts of artwork on there. There's 4-color process artwork. There's foil stamping, which is an offline process. Then there's some spot colors on here as well. This is, you may see this on a box. You may not see this on a box. Don't judge the art. It's all just for this class. We're going to go through it, and this is like a file that I would typically see before it goes to production, and we're going to kind of go through all the issues with this file and why it's important to understand what's wrong with it and how to fix it. And you're going to see this stuff is pretty easy if you know what you're looking for. Once you've got it all set up, you can hand this off to somebody, and they're going to have a pretty good idea of what it is that you want and what decisions to make on your behalf, or be able to have a conversation with you about why those decisions may or may not be working and have you really understand what's going on. So I appreciate you guys being here. If this is your first time showing up to the packaging class, I'd love to know, just leave a comment and say, hey, I'm here from New Jersey or India or wherever it is that you're tuning in from. So I'd love to hear from you. Please just drop a note in the comments to make sure that this is even working. I'm not talking to myself here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share some stuff. So the first thing I did is I created a Dieline, a template for a drawer box. And you're going to see this drawer box. I download everything. So I'm pointing in the wrong direction. I download everything from diecuttemplates.com. You can use /unboxd if you like. It's an affiliate link. I get like $2 or something if you download it from here. But to offset that, I also have a promo code, which is Avelio20, which saves you 20%. So you actually end up saving those $2, which is pretty cool. I'll end up putting a link in the comments below, but I just type in all the information into diecuttemplates.com, the size of the box that I want, the type of box that I want, all the different additions, if I want a ribbon on here, whatever. And then they immediately set up the file. I download it as an SVG and I drop it into Illustrator. Now, the reason that I drop it into Illustrator is that for the most part, packaging, you're going to be working in Illustrator. I've seen designers working in InDesign, and that's great. And it's completely possible. You can output a PDF from there that can go to production, but it's set up properly. And you don't have all of the appropriate links. You don't have all of the fonts, all the different things that can happen that go wrong. Essentially, those files become a pain in the ass to take apart and to put together again on your behalf. And sometimes it's really small things, like it might be a different font type, where it could be like an ITC font versus just a standard font. May have a different, the name might be a little bit different, and it comes in. Obviously, you'll be able to see the errors in there, but sometimes, depending on who you're working with, they may not see that error, and they might go to print, and then you'll realize that, something to make sure that you're working in Illustrator that makes it super easy. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to take a look at this file. All right, Rachel, we got somebody from Arizona. So you're probably like right up the road. Rachel, how's it going? Um, we got Felipe from BE. I don't know what BE is. Let me know where that is. And then we've got Staten Island. So thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate you guys commenting here. Let me know where you guys are coming in from. There's, last week we had people coming in from Turkey, from India, and here in Arizona. So it's great to see that we're getting pretty we're spreading pretty wide here. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen. Cool. So this is Illustrator. Like I said, you want to be working in Illustrator. So like I said, you want to be working in Illustrator versus InDesign. You definitely don't want to be setting up any packaging in Photoshop either, which I've seen that done too. It can become a pretty disastrous file. Oh, we've got Lisa Russuk McDonough hopping on here, who is one of my favorite people on the planet. And Lisa, you're going to comment in here. You're going to correct me if I'm wrong, because you are a production monster. You've encountered every type of problem, I'm sure. So what we're looking at here, and I'm going to zoom in, is this is a drawer box. I've already preset the layers in here. So what you're going to see is, I set up a layers information layer, which is just all the callouts, the dimensions, all your sizing. I have a cut file, a cut layer, which this is actually where the paper is going to be cut. And this is a rigid wrapped box. So this is the actual paper that'll be cut. I also have then the folds. So you see where the folds are, and I can tell immediately that I'm missing a couple of folds here. Right, because I need these little flaps to fold. And then I'm doing this kind of quick here. Perfect. And then I also have the board. And this is the board. So there's going to be a gray board piece that'll get cut. It would look like this, and then it would get wrapped with paper. So this is the board, and then here's the paper, and this is what we're going to be placing our artwork on. If you've watched my previous video that I showed how to set up your files, your layers in your file, this is the way that I do it. I do a board. If I need to, I do a fold, I cut, and then I do artwork and information, just to keep everything separate and easy to manage. I place my artwork on one layer, and what we're going to take a look at here is this file. Now this is an NFT that I picked up. I really dig it. It's called the Art of Seasons, which is pretty cool. And since I own the art, I'm going to go ahead and use it. I've placed dummy art over here. This is an offline process, which this is going to be, let's say, a foil stamp or an emboss or a silk screen. Anything that's offline needs to be a separate component, and we're gonna look at that as well. So, what does offline mean? When you print for color process, you're going to be running on a large press. There's 4 colors, 4 stations. You got your cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It could be a 6-color press. There's a variety of different types of presses, but it's going to run. Your sheet's going to run through there. It's going to get printed, and you're going to have to take that sheet off of that machine, put it on another machine to do a foil stamp. And and I'm going to show you what this hot stamping looks like. Trying to get fancy here. Okay, so this is foil stamping. Let's say that these sheets were already printed. It has to go through a whole separate process, and there's a million different types of machines that do foil stamping. But here is just a great example. And what's happening in here is as that sheet goes over that roll, there is a hot piece of metal that's being pressed into it across a piece of foil that's then leaving that transfer foil onto the paper. So again, it's a separate process from four color printing. So you have to set it up differently. And you have to set this up as a vector file, because this is going to be essentially your computer's going to take it. Oh, just trying to stop here so you can see like the ending result. Right, so you're getting this really detailed piece here that's pressed into the sheet of paper. So you have to do, you have to do vector in order to get that quality impression. So Lisa says, design should be reviewed for feasibility with the printer production team prior to finalizing the design. 100%. And I think once you've set up your file and you're ready to go, walking through it with a printer and having that conversation as to, this is what I want, having, an Epson proof or even just a printout that you're happy with for color matching if you're doing four color process, and having that conversation, it's going to allow that back and forth between you and the press team to really make the right decisions. So thanks Lisa, because that's where a lot of times there's issues. You finalize the art and you're like, I love it, everybody signed off on it. You go to production and then production's like, oh, hey, we need a bigger space. We need more breathing room here. I'm going to show this art again here. Hang on here. Yeah, so like, for example, this foil stamp, if this is going to be foil stamped, I'm just sharing here, trying to figure this out. Great. So if we were going to foil stamp this, and let's say, for example, the pressing for some reason says, oh, we need to have, a 1/4 of an inch of space between the edge of the box and the edge of the foil. Well, now you've got to change. Now you've got to change your artwork. A lot of times I've seen, people wanting to run foil over a fold. Well, that becomes really difficult. So if you don't have a conversation about that beforehand, before you get everything finalized, you're going to have problems. So again, let's take a look at this art. Let's kind of go through and see what we even have and what the problems are. First thing is we've got an image, right? We've got images happening here. So if we've got images printing, it's going to be four color process, right? There's no printing in RGB. There's no printing, we can print in spot colors, and there's a lot of different things that we can do on the back end. But as a great starting point, we're doing four color process. And Sean, thanks for the Lemmy comment. Big fan of Motorhead for life, 100%. Yeah, so we've got images, we've got four color process, CMYK. So the first thing you do is you're working in Illustrator. If you look up here into this corner, I don't even know if I can zoom into that. It immediately tells you this is an RGB. So that's your first problem. You want to go into File, and in File, there is Document Color Mode. You want to set up your color mode to CMYK, and that's not sharing. So let me change this view so that you can actually see everything that's happening. Cool. So first thing, up here in this corner, it says RGB. So that's a problem. So we're going to go into Document Color Mode, go to CMYK. Right now, this is in CMYK. This document is in CMYK, so it's reading everything in four color process, which is important because we're going to want to check our art at the very end by doing a separations preview. Separations preview is like a killer little tool in Illustrator that will allow you to see everything as separations. So, here it is. If I click on Overprint Preview, it's going to show me, if I turn off my four color process, it turns everything off. And then I can, my board, my die cut, my folds, those are set up as spot colors. So it's a great little tool to use to just check your artwork. This is not the best case at this moment because I just changed it from RGB to CMYK. That's going to be a problem if I don't kind of look at it further. But before we get to the color, let's look at the box. We've got a drawer box. This is the sleeve of the box. This is the opening. So this is the front part of the box. This is where the paper wraps down, and then this part here comes underneath and folds underneath. This is the top because you don't have a seam here. The paper rolls over. This is going to have a seam on the bottom because that sheet kind of rolls down. So it's important just to know what the top is so that you know what you're working with. So if this is the top of the box, and I want this to be a full stamp, you can see this jagged line here. I've spelled dummy art wrong because I've used it as one word. And it's still type, so I can still change it if I wanted to. That's great in the early review stage in case I'm going to change anything. But if you're going to go to print, if you're going to go to press, you just do, you want to outline that, which is just Shift Command O for outline, or you can go up into, type and outline, create outlines. This now becomes a piece of art that I can't edit. And like we said about foil stamping, this is now a vector piece of art that can be turned into an actual foil stamp. When it's type, you can't read it as a vector piece of artwork because it's still editable. So you got to make sure that you outline everything. And really, I just say outline all your copy, and that's going to save you a ton of problems, unless you're making edits on copy. So first thing, these images, the document was an RGB. It's now CMYK. That doesn't mean that my images are CMYK. They can still be in RGB if I go to Photoshop. So I'm going to open up this image in Photoshop. Perfect. You guys can see that. Same thing. This little tab up here is a lifesaver. It shows you everything you need to know. This immediately tells me that this image is in RGB. So it looks super bright. It looks great. As soon as I change it, if you go to image, go to mode, go to CMYK, it gives you a warning. Hey, this is, you're about to change the way this thing looks is basically what it's telling you. It's not going to look super great. When we change it, it does say CMYK up here. The color gets a little bit more muted because RGB is for your screen. There's millions of colors there. CMYK, you're just working with the 4 and you're combining it to make all these other colors. So I'm going to go ahead and save this image. It's also saved as a JPEG. I see a lot of JPEGs in packaging. Personally, I prefer to save it out as an EPS with some compression or a TIFF, depending on the file size and the file itself. So here, some of the images have been updated. I'm going to hit yes. You can see that they got slightly duller. Now this piece here is going to roll into the box. Do you want your image to stop right on the very edge? And if you do, the way that this stuff wraps, and I'm looking around like so, if you've got a board here and the paper wraps around, even if it's on an automated machine or if it's wrapped by hand, it's never going to wrap exactly the same. There's always going to be a tolerance. Every machine is a little bit different, but as a good rule of thumb, it's like 1/8 of an inch of a difference that you're going to get. Michael Gardner here says, outlines help lock your file from editing or the font issues. So 100%, it's like the first thing you want to do or the last thing you want to do before you hand something over, so that you don't get any issues, because it's a pain. It's a serious pain. All right. So since you're going to have a tolerance on that image never being in the same position, always having a little bit of a range, you're going to hear your printer ask you to make sure that you include bleeds. Now, bleeds is having enough image, not just for this rollover, but maybe you want this to go all the way in. Instead of stopping here, you want it to have enough image that goes beyond the cut, so that you never cut your artwork and then have like a white strip of the blank paper, or have like the messiness of the edge of the artwork. You always want to make sure that you've got more than enough. And in this case, I don't. So I would either have to go into the image and draw more if that was possible. or I'm going to need to enlarge that. And this is what happens when you hand your files off, and now the press team, the pre-production team, they've had to enlarge your art in order to accommodate for bleed, which now made everything a little bit larger and things may not align. So again, this is what you want to have that conversation with your pressman before you even get to handing off files. Like, let's figure out what the problems are, what's going wrong here. So always include a bleed. That's what that means. Just have 1/8 of an inch minimum. Here as well, the art stops at the fold. So that's where that rolls over. We don't want to have any white showing up ever on any of our boxes. So we want to increase this bleed. We're going to increase this bleed across all of these to 1/8 of an inch. This one here is similar to the one on the top of the box. Let's have that roll all the way over. And again, we're short. There's a little bit of white there. This one may not be as big of an issue because it would be on the inside of the box. But since this image is a little bit off center, when I scale it, everything moves. So this is looking pretty good. You could take this art and you could bleed it all the way over. But this here is actually going to be, that will wrap around your box. And then the other panel, this panel on top, will wrap over it. So because you're using, in this case, we're using white paper, and you've got artwork on that little glue flap that's right here. When that folds up and then you place the other art on top of it, you can get some, it is a little bit translucent, so you may be able to see through. So you don't necessarily want all of this art underneath here, because you're going to be able to see a little bit of that. So just having that 1/8 of an inch bleed, the minimal amount of bleed that's required for this particular press or whoever it is that is going to be wrapping it, do that. And it's just something to look out for in your packaging, right? There's all these little details that can really make an impact. So we've outlined this, that's great, but we want this to be a foil stamp. We've got this on the artwork, and if we look at our color swatch, well, it's an RGB. So one, it's not going to be legible for production, and two, we want this to be a full stamp. There's no RGB foil stamps. That just doesn't exist. So what you need to do is, one, you need to create a swatch. We want this to be a gloss black. So we're going to go ahead and create a new swatch. We're going to name this gloss black. If you're using Kurz or Luxor or Crown, whatever foil company you're using, they've got their own numbering system. And their numbering system is similar to Pantone. So you would say, for example, if this was Luxor 832, I don't even know what 832 is, but we're going to do Luxor 832 gloss black. Process color, we don't want it to be a process color because it's going to be 4-color process. That's what that means. So we're going to do spot color, and then CMYK. That's fine because this is just how it's being viewed. You could do grayscale since it is black. Go to 100. Boom. All right, and now the next thing I'll do is create another layer, and this layer is going to be my foil stamp with 1O. That's my foil stamp. I'm going to click here. I'm going to drag this up here. Now in production, they can turn things off and see where the art actually is. And Michael here mentions also that there's glue flaps with no ink areas. Yeah, depending on the type of box construction, you want to make sure that there's no glue, there's no ink in certain areas, because the glue may have an issue with the ink, depending on the ink type, the glue type. In this case, this is a paper wrap, but you're right. So in this one, you wouldn't want to have glue ink in those areas. And you may see somebody do, if you take boxes apart, you may see this art look like that. And then they would have like a white strip for the glue. In this case, we don't want to see anything showing through here. So we don't want to have any ink in this area for that reason. So we've got our foil stamp. Awesome. Now this Taos is still text, but we don't want to have this outline. We don't want to have this as a foil stamp. We do want to outline it, but we don't want it as foil stamp. Hey, it's still an RGB. That's a problem. So we want to go over here, change that to CMYK. And there's a lot of different ways to do black. A lot of times I'll see designers set this up as 100% black, or they'll go and make that grayscale at 100% black. That's great. But you're printing 4-color process, so you have all these other colors to work with. The amount of ink that's being laid down in this 4-color area is a ton. And the amount of ink that would be laid down in this section, if it was just black, is actually not as much. So what happens is this color here tends to be a lot more vibrant than your 100% black. There's a lot of different ways to set up your black. You can either push it a little bit, which means you want to add another color in there. Typically it's going to be like a cyan, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically I do, typically a 30% is going to get you just a little bit darker of a black, and 30% may be a little bit too much. So definitely check with your production team. The other one, and I can't recall what number I use, but I believe it's 40, 30, 30. Lisa, Michael, first one to call me out on this wins a prize. But you want to build your black. So there's a push, which is just add a little bit of cyan to it. It's going to make it a little bit darker, or you actually build your black. And a built black is going to give you a really solid black, because now you've got 100% black ink, and then you've built up these other colors underneath it to then layer that black on top. Perfect. So for a push, Michael says 30% is about right. Awesome. I'm glad I didn't screw that one up. And then, yeah, for building that black, that 40, 30, 30 is a good place to be. That's also going to give you a nice clean line. A lot of times in cosmetics, you're going to see, like, for example, I don't know, let me find something here. And Lisa, you call me out if I'm totally wrong on this. I don't have like a great color section here, but let's say this background. Let's say this background was, some variation of this color. And you've got, in cosmetics, you've got a ton of regulatory information that needs to be laid down. A lot of times you're going to see it in white. This is a trick I learned. Rich black, 60. So Lisa's recommending rich black be 60, 40, 30. Okay. Again, so doing that text, that was black as a 60, 40, 30 is a great way to push that color. I've done 40, 30, 30. But again, working with your printer, check with them and see what they recommend. Everybody's a little bit different. And it also is going to yield a different color, but you want to really get a really rich black. And that's the way to do it. Somebody here says that sometimes they double print the black. That's great if you do a double hit of the black, but that's going to require a second pass, or a larger machine. If you're doing a 4-color process machine, now you need a 6-color station, or have a 5th station to hit that black twice. I think we've got a LinkedIn fight. Michael's saying that 60, 40, 30 is too much ink lay down. But then we've got 75, 66. That's way too much. That's way too much ink, in my opinion, guys. And then underneath, you already know the print sequence is YMCK, blah, blah, blah. So great point. Stefano, is your sequence is going to be a little bit different. But let's get back to this here. Right. So a lot of times you're going to see cosmetics packaging that has white text on it that's really small. Let's say that this was the background color. One thing that I've done, which I picked up a few years ago, let's say that this is outlined, is I would copy the text, paste it behind it, and then I'm going to add a stroke to it. Not a gigantic stroke, but let's say, a 0.125 stroke around that. And the reason that I would do that, and it only works on certain background colors, is that you're not going to see this. It ends up acting like a trap, and you're going to have a really sharp edge because now your edge of white isn't up against three colors that are combined to create this, where you're going to have a little bit of a dot pattern. It's actually, that little dot pattern will bleed into this blue stroke, and you'll have a really clean presentation for your text. Look at some of the comments here. All right, so okay, so back to this, we've got a built black. Anytime you're doing black against a four-color process, and you're already doing four-color processes, you may as well throw in some extra color into that black to make that really black, so it doesn't look muted, and it will look muted. It will look almost like a dark gray against a rich four-color process image. So you don't want to do that. And then the drawer itself, the drawer is going to go in here. The drawer, we wanted to be a similar color here. I picked this 5523, PMS 5523. So we don't have to print four-color process for the drawer if we're just doing a single color. And we're going to do, so instead of doing four-color process on a large area to just fill one color, you can start getting banding happening where some areas are darker, some areas are lighter, because just that's what's going to happen because you're not getting enough of a combination on the press in terms of where that ink is going. So you're going to pick a Pantone color. Now there's these books and these books here. Right, you've got your uncoded and coded, and I've gone ahead and picked this color 5523, and you can see here 5523 is like a nice little light bluish greenish color, and it's uncoded. And then you've got your coded, and those two colors are a little bit different. Now, this is the thing that a lot of times designers get confused about, is that, so on that type and laying down that trick, laying down that little fine point around text to get a really crisp, sharp, your art directors are not going to notice, and nobody's really going to notice, but you're going to get a really sharp impression. What they will notice, though, is if you don't do it, they're going to be like, why is this text so blurry? And they won't necessarily understand why. So do yourself a favor, learn that trick and deploy it. Let me know when you do. A lot of times people get confused about these two books, coded and uncoded. The color's the same, right? So it's like if you took a Sharpie, a yellow Sharpie or orange Sharpie, the ink coming out of that Sharpie is orange. It's the same color. If I write on a uncoded paper, when I lay that down, it's going to absorb, and that paper is going to show through a little bit. The light's not going to actually go through the ink and bounce back the same way that it will when you've done it on a coded sheet. Right. So what's happening here is when this is the uncoded, it's super bright in here. When the light goes, it's actually going, into the paper, and it refracts back into your eyeball. And it takes a little bit longer to do that. On coded, the ink laydown is so thin and the paper is so reflective and so smooth that the light actually just goes through, bounces back, and it changes the color, but it's the same exact ink. So make sure that you're picking the right ink for your substrate, and don't do, even though this is possible, don't say on an uncoded sheet, well, I want it to match 5523 coded, because now you're asking for a custom color. You're not asking for 5523, you're asking for a custom color, which is fine. Just be ready to pay for that. And it's always going to be a little bit different than what you've asked for, because now they've got to mix an ink, test it on your sheet, make sure that it's going to come close to what you wanted. So in this case, we're picking 5523 uncoded because this is going to be an uncoded box. What we're going to do here, pick this. Let's go to the color, check it out. And it is four-color process, not RGB. Great. So this is going to be a four-color process print, but I want this to be a spot color. So I'm going to come in here. I'm not going to create my own color, because in Illustrator, if you go into, you click this little menu, you go to open swatch library, color books, go to, it's not CMYK, but it is going to be solid, uncoded. Get this little window. Let's type in, what is it? 5523. here it is, and we click it, it changes, and you saw that it got added to this area here immediately. And for the most part, let me take a look and see what we got going here. We've got our information. We've got our cut. We've got our folds. We've got our board. We've got our full stamp on the foil line. And then we've got our artwork. This guy's pretty much set. There's going to be regulatory that's going to have to go on here, whether it's like made in the US, made in China, made in India, whatever kind of country of origin requirements are on there. Anything else that you need to do. So let me check that again. I didn't realize I didn't have my screen up. Yeah, so just checking through this real quick. We've got artwork layer. We have our foil. So just the foil is on the foil layer. We've got our board. We've got our folds, our cut. Okay, so everything is really set up and kind of ready to go. I picked this color here, and I don't know if this is the part where you guys missed, but this was a 4-color process. And then I went into my swatches, click this menu. And in this menu, I can go down to Open Swatch Libraries. I go to Color Books. I go to Solid Uncoated. And in here, I can type in the number that I want, and then I click on that. As soon as I do that, it adds that swatch to my swatches. So here is where you can actually now use, you go to your windows and you can use separations preview, because everything is set up as actual 4-color process and actual PMS colors, Pantone colors, full stamps. You can see that this grew. We have more colors happening here than we did before. So I'm going to turn off my 4-color process. Everything that's 4-color process gets hidden. My information, that should actually be a registration color, but we're going to just leave it as is. The board, the die cut to the fold. Here's our foil stamp. And then there's that color. So that's great, right? It shows you everything is selected properly. This is the way that the computer is going to read it when it goes to output. When it goes to output plates. So super important. Now let's take a look at this 4-color process. Right, let's take a look at our black. This is going to give you a good rundown of your black. It's going to show you, all the areas. This is your black here. Right, you can see that this contains yellow also, because we did that 40, 30, 30. And this is what we're building that black upon. This here is knocked out, even though this is a foil. When it's going to production, that's going to want to be set to an overprint, but I never recommend that designers touch overprint. And the reason is, if you select the wrong thing to overprint anywhere in your artwork, you're never going to know until it's too late. So leave that, never set your art to overprint. Let your printer, your press team, let them mess with overprint. It's going to be the safest way to move forward. I see a lot of times overprint screwing things up down the line that you don't realize until it's actually on shelf, and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe this is what happened. So just leave it this way. It won't screw anything up. I promise. Just make sure that you're communicating things up front and letting them know that this is a full stamp. And you can see all of this. So this is everything to set up a file in Illustrator. The one last trick I'm going to do, because I realize this is going super long and everybody's got work to do, is if you go into Photoshop, there's a few ways that you can update that. You can change the art. Sometimes what I like to do is go in here and maybe, depending on what color we're doing, is maybe just adjusting, maybe bumping cyan a little bit, getting this to be a little bit more vibrant. Or you can even, without changing anything in Photoshop, you can talk to your press team and let them know, go to your press team and say, hey, I want to push this color, make it a little bit more vibrant. Can we change out magenta for a Rubine red? That's going to give you some really vibrant purples. There's a lot of purples and pinks and things happening in this artwork. there's a lot of stuff that you can do on the back end that has nothing to do with Photoshop. There's times when I've actually gone through, not this book, but like the neon book, and replaced all cyan, magenta, yellow, and black with all neon colors, kind of having an understanding of what those colors are going to do when they combine to create a new image, and having like the craziest, brightest impressions. So a lot of really cool stuff that you can do. Yeah, and then Stefano says there was a lot of magenta in those greens. So, if you change to a Rubine red, it's going to impact those greens as well. But there's a lot of really cool tricks that you can do. But I think the best thing you can do is set your file up for success, have a conversation with your press team, and let them do their job without having to make decisions for the art that you did. And the best thing you can do is setting that up right from the beginning. So I appreciate you guys being on here. If you guys have any questions, leave them in here. I appreciate you guys being on here. Lisa, bump plates are awesome. 100%. It's like you have so much control on the production side, on the printing side. Become friends with your pressmen. Make sure that you're asking the right questions. Make sure that you're asking them, go on press, do a press check, ask them why they're doing what they're doing. It's the best thing that you can possibly do to learn. It's the best thing that you can do to really become a better designer. And Stefano, the separation is very poor. Again, we didn't go into the actual image and making adjustments to that particular image because we wanted to look at this end of it. We can talk about file prep on the photo, on the image side next time. I think that's a great point. So I do appreciate you guys being on here. Thanks so much. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making this. I can't believe this went on super long. This is like the longest one we've ever done. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.